there's almost never a book on a subject where I consider myself an expert, where I'm thrilled to read it. And then we never, ever have that scenario play out when the author is also one of the most interesting commentators in America. Michelle Malkin is here with me in studio with her new book, Open Borders, Inc. Michelle, it's so great to have you in Breitbart News Daily.
That was so wonderful. I'm done.
I can't offer a better endorsement than that. It is the book. It's tenacious. If you read this book and you do not think of the open borders crisis as at least top 2 issues facing the country, you read a different book than I read. And there are so many people, not just irresponsible about it. You go through who is on the take, the gigantic multi-billion-dollar industry that is our open border, if not multi-trillion-dollar industry. It's shocking, and a credit to you for just having the wherewithal to go through the detail that is in this book is overwhelming.
Thank you. You know what I was driven by in large part was the frustration that a lot of readers who would email me after they'd see a 2-minute cable segment on the illegal alien caravans. And the question was a refrain over and over again. Well, who are these people? Where's the money coming from? And I can't answer that. Nobody can answer it in 2 minutes. And the lack of curiosity on the part of most in the mainstream media, and frustratingly, even among the media that is friendly to the right, was really the gas. That was the juice for me. And it is the longest book that I've written of the 7 books that I wrote, and I am so grateful to Regnery that they didn't cut a single page.
Wow.
I thought, if I'm going to have one shot at delivering a deep dive dossier, a reference guide for people, especially leading up.
That's what it is. It's a reference guide. It's a magnum opus, and you've even got the appendices. You've got the list of Antifa violence. You've got lists of the exact organizations who are getting money from open borders groups. This is supposed to be a reference point to take into the future of who we need to worry about.
It is. And, there are a lot of books in the bookstores that are vanity projects that basically have the shelf life of French fries from McDonald's. This is a book that I hope is built to last, and it's a book that I hope that doesn't just sit on a shelf or become a doorstop. I want people to use the information. That's what drives me. And the mantra of the book and this project is follow the money, find the truth. There are a lot of incredible reporters on the right who have done work, and they are unsung. And I have named them. I thank them in my acknowledgments, and I want readers to do their own homework and to continue follow them. And many of them are at Breitbart.
Yes, and by the way, thank you for wonderful acknowledgments. I think we're plugged. I think we come up second in the acknowledgments, so that's high praise. There's something here that's interesting for people, and again, this is one where I don't say get one for yourself. This is one where you get multiples, and you pass this one out to your friends on the left or liberals who are open-minded, and they should get these arguments. It's basically a summary of what you've been working on for a decade, what we've been working on at Breitbart, Daniel Horowitz at Conservative Review, the few people who get it on this issue. You basically synthesize all of it and put it all in one place. So this is your crash course. If you feel like you don't fully understand what's happening at our border, this is it. And it's interesting, Michelle, because when you think Michelle Malkin, you think pundit, you think someone who TV talking head, someone who writes columns. There's barely a word of punditry in the book. It's all facts and figures. You don't have any room for it because you've so much to document.
Yes, that's right. And so whether it's quoting from IRS documents of these tax-exempt nonprofit charities that essentially are the political action arm of the Democrat Party, or exhaustive lists of the legal organizations that make up what I call the illegal alien lawyers lobby. I mean, there are more than 400 separate nonprofit entities and groups that I mention. And I also think it's very important that American taxpayers know that it's largely their money that's funding their own destruction.
That's correct. And that was something where I would say that was the part where I learned the most. I didn't realize exactly how much of our taxpayer dollars were going to these open border causes. And for me, one thing that really hurt was I'm a Catholic, and how much of the money I'm putting in the collection plate, which I've stopped doing since the latest scandal. So I will show up to church, but I'm doing my part to starve them of cash.
Yes.
But I had no idea how much of the collection plate money goes straight to the illegal alien enablers, not just the aliens themselves. It's not a personal thing against brown people. This is about.
Not. You're talking to one.
I certainly am. This is about. You go after the people who aren't enablers, but the people who are the financial beneficiaries of the illegal immigration industry.
Yes, that's right. And, your average conservative consumer of information is very, very familiar with the name George Soros. But I think they're less familiar with the interaction and the infrastructure between George Soros, the Vatican, the Catholic Church, and every one of its sub-organizations, the Conference on Catholic Bishops, the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, Catholic Charities, Catholic Relief Services. There was an excerpt that Breitbart carried over the weekend from the book where I talk about the Jesuit refugee service and its role in standing up the illegal alien shelter network from Central America, stretching all the way into all of the sanctuary churches inside the United States. So people need to think very carefully if they sit in Catholic church pews on whether they're going to donate to the annual Thanksgiving fund, because that is multiple millions of dollars that's going to go straight into amnesty shills that operate as, a compassion network when really what they are is a smuggling network.
And you also are not afraid to go after people on the right, which gets you unpersoned, canceled, banned from certain places. We don't need to. I don't want to get in to where, because I think if anyone is wise, regardless of any history you might have with them, they should have you on to talk about this book. Everyone should know about this book because of the information that's in it. But one thing that's very striking to me about this town right now in Washington, D.C., is that the quickest way, as the expression goes, to get people to change their mind is to cut them a check. And you go through this with a lot of people on the right as well. And we don't need to get into the specifics. We can if you want. This is Breitbart, so you're free. Mm-hmm. But it is you don't hold back on the people who are on the dole on the right from the open borders lobby. And this is a big deal because you get into towards the end of the book the next generation, the next phase, and this includes the tech giants and their role. And I had no clue exactly how open borders Jeff Bezos was. Like that was, and I'm sure we'd report on a Breitbart, it slipped my mind. He backs all these open borders groups, and he's probably the least threatening of the tech giants at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. I would agree with that.
And so we know Google and Facebook's history of it. This is the thing in Washington now, is that people on the right are getting bought off by these people. And that to me is so frightening.
Yes. There used to be an old joke that we should have with politicians uniforms like the NASCAR race drivers have, where you just put their donors, on the uniforms and they walk around like that, right? And then we would know that's transparency, that's sunlight, right? But the fact is that, yes, there are many of these Beltway establishment Republicans who are completely bought off. And, I talk openly in the book about the Koch brothers. I spoke at Americans for Prosperity events. I did not realize that they were going to go on then and sponsor something called the Libra Initiative, which is every bit as bad as any other Soros organization that shills for so-called illegal alien dreamers.
Yes.
And they make, the same feckless arguments that end up harming American citizens, American college students, and American workers. And they need to be called out for it. And Breitbart has done an incredible job of being fearless in that regard.
Thanks again. The book is Open Borders, Inc., Who's Funding America's Destruction. Michelle Malkin is my guest. Book is out now as of yesterday. It's also, you can get an audio book. Even I noticed on Amazon, I think it's got audio CD. If anyone has a CD player, I think you can get it
what a
that way.
That is.
That way as well. I'm sure that's going to get you rich, Michelle. Audio right. CDs.
There's the cash cow.
So let's go through some of these specifics that I wanted you to either expand upon or I had questions about. From the book. And first of all, when we touched on Soros a bit, you really go through exactly all of his spider web of influence. But he talks openly against national sovereignty. And he is opposed to national sovereignty. And Hillary Clinton talking about how her goal is hemispheric open borders. You quote a lot of Hollywood types talking about how they love, I think it was Guillermo del Toro, the director, who loves how international he can just fly everywhere. because that's very relatable. We all fly to South America and North America and Europe. We're just doing that all the time in MAGA country. Hey, France could be MAGA country. You never know. So, but talk to us about this war on national sovereignty and what it really means, which is a war for globalism.
Yes, and this is not some wild black helicopter conspiracy. Although all of the Soros-paid minions on the internet have already attacked me and the book as some kind of conspiracy theory.
They're referred to as Soros-funded freaks on the show.
I call them Soros monkeys.
There you go,
flying monkeys. But Soros is very explicit about it in his books and in his speeches all over the world, that sovereignty is a quote-unquote obstacle. Yes. So he sees our borders as obstacles and our walls and every attempt to enforce our sovereignty and the rule of law. You've got a lot of very learned listeners who've understood what the United Nations agenda is. And by the way, the United Nations meets on September 17th.
Well, by the way, if my intro to the United Nations was reading your book, I would think their agenda is grifting brown people.
There you go. That's pretty much the bottom line. So people wonder, well, how did Minneapolis turn into what it turned into, and Lewiston, Maine, and Nashville, Tennessee? Well, if you've been paying attention to UNGA assemblies every year, you would understand that. And so the book doesn't go into an incredible depth because I tried as much as possible to document the money. But this administration understands the threat that every one of these global compacts poses to American sovereignty, and of course they're putting that understanding into action. And it's very encouraging to me to hear plans floated of zeroing out the refugee resettlement numbers. A moratorium is long overdue.
Right.
Not only for the cultural and financial impact that it's causing on a lot of these working class neighborhoods and towns that never got a say in whether they wanted these refugees, largely from Muslim countries and African countries in the first place, but also, again, on September 11th, to consider the national security implications of bringing people over here who have an unshakable hatred of all things Western.
Yes, and this is about a war on the West. That's where this is going once they're done with their war in the United States. It's about Western culture in general. It's becoming almost a swear word or something that could get you deplatformed if you have Western supremacism. It's nothing to do with white supremacism. It has to do with the West has the premier values. And at this rate, Michelle, do you believe that there will be a moment soon where I'm not allowed to say that on the air, that the West has the best values?
Yeah, it's coming. And in large part for many...
Even if I said the first thing is the way we treat our women is better. Even if I started there.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, does it?
No, it doesn't, because they picked the words. And where did this come from? Well, this is why I thought it was very important to include a chapter on the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yes.
And long before the deplatformings that we have seen over the last year or so, back in 2006 and 2007, there was a little video that popped up on YouTube. And, of course, YouTube had really just come into existence then. It was a partnership between the National Council of La Raza and the Anti-Defamation League, creating a guide book, basically, that was a code book of code words of hate. And I was on this list and in this video because I had used the forbidden words Azatlan, Reconquista, and Invasion.
Wow. And you have a book called Invasion.
I do, and I'm not allowed to say that word in certain places.
Even though you're a child,
without being triggered.
Even though you're the child of immigrants.
Yeah, it's like I said, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. None of it matters.
Yeah.
A brown woman, child of immigrants.
Yes.
But if you say invasion, you're a white supremacist. Just know that, Michelle. So if people listen to the show with any regularity and do not, and I haven't convinced you that Google is pure evil, then I don't know why you're still listening, because I think that I've made that a pretty clear goal of the show. But I had no clue that they were working with the SPLC.
Right.
And that is a confluence of evil. It is hard to fathom that. And if you guys had wanted one more excuse to shut down your Google accounts,
Yes. And so I have been withdrawing for the last year, and it's hard to wean yourself
it really
off
is.
of it.
It really is.
I do want to acknowledge that for people.
Yeah.
But that's, of course, the genius of Google,
that's
isn't
right.
it? Is they're everywhere. And of course, it's not just Google. I mean, we mentioned Amazon and Tim Cook, of course,
sure.
who is in the hip pocket of the SPLC, Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg. But even other platforms where I had never worried that they would be polluted by politics, WordPress. I mentioned in the book that a heroine of mine, Ann Corcoran, who ran an incredible reporting blog called Refugee Resettlement Watch, had that whole blog, the plug was just completely pulled just 2 months ago by WordPress. My blog is on the WordPress platform, and the opening of this book talks about my fear about our ability to communicate exactly the kind of ideas and information that are in Open Borders, Inc. I do now wake up every morning wondering if, when I log into michellemalkin.com, if it will still exist. That is a stunning proposition. And
then you talk about Chase Banks, you talk about MasterCards. Debanking is next. MasterCard is a big deal. That's my best credit card is a MasterCard. I'm afraid one day I'm not going to be able to use it anymore. But then what happens next? Where do we go from there?
Well, I can tell you I've taken steps to change banks. After I read about what happened to Enrique Tarrio of the Proud Boys and what some of these big credit card companies attempted to do to people like Robert Spencer and David Horowitz, I switched from a major national chain to my local bank in Colorado Springs. And again, it's difficult to do these things, but I recommend to people in the very last chapter of the book some concrete steps they can take. But if you think this country is worth saving, yes, you will take inconvenient steps to save it.
So how do we motivate people when people really don't want to be bothered? And I admit I've been a little discouraged with some of the wokeness in our sports now, and on products like Nike, and people just seem relatively on the right, unwilling to engage in any sort of basic activism.
Yes.
Here, and I like the NFL. I don't watch anymore.
Same.
I love Nike products, as I've said in the show. I couldn't afford all the Nike I wanted as a kid. I can afford the Nike now.
Yeah.
I don't get Nike anymore.
Same.
I'm punishing myself. But I'm doing it because I think these people really hate this country. I think these are organizations that stand against America, and I don't want to support them.
Yeah.
But most people aren't with me, Michelle.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I mean, and you even had Doug Ducey, who, got all of this social media buzz for purportedly standing up to Nike and then being caught at a barbecue a couple days later wearing Nike shoes. I mean, he either walk the walk or shut up.
Yes.
I mean, don't complain if you're going to keep subsidizing the people who are destroying this country. And start small, I would say. Do the easy things.
Sure.
And for me, easy is withdrawing from Hollywood completely. I get a headache anyway watching movies in a movie theater now. I'm like, I can't do it.
It's now a theme park ride, yes. And this is a very persuasive, this is another one where this is just tenacious, just one example after the next of Hollywood hypocrisy. And you just bludgeon them with all living in gated communities and behind giant walls and then advocating for open borders and spreading lies about ICE and things like that, demonizing people who are putting themselves on the front lines. And the efforts Hollywood is going, I mean, you make an absolute fool out of George Clooney and his wife Amal in the book.
That's right, on Lake Como.
Yeah, give us some details about Lake Como.
So, the local residents there are up in arms about the refugee dump. And you've got Clooney and his gated compounds, of course, not only in Lake Como, but on the English countryside and in the most exclusive gated communities in Beverly Hills. And, I'm an ink-stained wretch by nature, so I loved writing that chapter. But I'm sure, again, that your informed readers know this, but a lot of mainstream readers don't. And unfortunately, you don't even see this on Fox. But the connection between the Clooney Foundation and the Tides Foundation, which funds something called the Young Center at the University of Chicago. And these are sort of the prime movers in the space of providing free legal representation to unaccompanied children, unaccompanied minors. And when I talk about the child smuggling racket, and of course Breitbart has done incredible work here talking about the fake families that are being incentivized by catch and release in this country, a policy that I've been illuminating since 2002 when I wrote Invasion, and only now we're doing something about it. But essentially I blame the Young Center and the Tides Foundation and the Clooney Foundation for the very suffering that that they always virtue signal about. That's on you, not on us.
I really think you should re-release Invasion, but with a more PC topic. Right. We'll call it Happy Clappy Time. And the book formerly known as Invasion.
Yeah, that's right. The I word.
So I was actually thinking about while we were talking about this, about the control of our language that the left is engaging in. And I'm still stunned that the NFL allows a team to be called the Patriots. Like it's going to be, how triggering is that going to be? So a couple of things that really resonated with me. We touched on one briefly. Catholics, we're funding the caravans. And this is a shame because I go to Catholic Church. I'm going to continue to go to Catholic Church. And it is just yet another thing that makes me think twice about it. And that's a bad thing. It's a bad thing. I think we're getting our rush to become more secular, get away from the Ten Commandments is a disaster for Western civilization. This is the type of stuff that makes people do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a little viral Twitter video a couple of years ago of a fed up rank and file Catholic who protested the pedophile scandals by burning her collection envelope. And I think that, there's an even more important reason now to be burning those envelopes, and that is thinking about how all of that money is directly funding this shelter network through Central America, and I referenced it before, all the way up into the U.S. And you've got all of these bishops every single day attacking our president and our country. We had the Pope just the other day bragging that he loves the criticism from the faction, the small faction of us, I'm a Catholic as well, who are defending American and sovereignty. He relishes that fight. That's more important. And I haven't talked about this, so this is news. But the Catholic Church is already mad at me about this book, and they haven't even read it yet. I simply mentioned very briefly in a speech that I gave to a pro-life group in Missouri that I was writing this book, and that it was no coincidence that there was an intersection between the very same types of radicals who hijacked the Catholic Church in Chicago, who aligned themselves with Saul Alinsky. I mean, the man, not just the concepts or the theories. And this goes all the way back to the 60s and 70s and the establishment of the Conference of Bishops itself, as well as the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, which is basically the social justice organizing wing of the Catholic Party. I simply mentioned that. And as punishment, a bishop in that state of Missouri threatened the funding of the organization that I was speaking to unless they disavowed the 40 seconds out of a 40-minute speech that I had given to this pro-life group, which does incredible work supporting crisis pregnancy centers. Those are the values of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, it's frightening. Let's talk a little bit more about this giant humanitarian network that facilitates our open borders, and we're funding it, and our Fed is helping. And this part made my blood boil. Tell us how the Fed basically is allowing for remittances to be sent to be sent around the world, enabling some of the worst actors on earth.
Yeah, so I was working on a section in Chapter 1, which is on the caravan cartel, called Banking on Illegals. And I'd reported on this, all the way back into from the late 1990s on Bank of America and Wells Fargo and private institutions that were profiting. And in the middle of that research, I discovered that the Federal Reserve itself was trying to hone in on this segment of the market with its own program to have a remittance program that is specifically marketed to illegal aliens in America. And this program still exists. It doesn't make a lot of money, but the idea that the federal government itself is breaking the laws of aiding and abetting illegal aliens and that it hasn't been shut down. I mean, not only should President Trump fulfill the promise that he made many months ago to tax remittances,
yes,
but he should shut down this Federal Reserve program as well. And Judicial Watch has been suing for more information. They've been waiting for years to get it. They should release it the Trump administration should release it to Judicial Watch and then shut it down.
Yeah, and this is what we were talking about a little bit during the break, about how people are very familiar with sanctuary cities and sanctuary states or counties, and with these in-state tuition and the Democrats wanting illegal aliens to get Medicare benefit and government-funded health care. But that's just the stuff we know off the top of our heads, Michelle. I mean, there's other stuff happening. This is what the Fed is basically encouraging illegal immigration with this plan, and that is, I wonder why so many purists don't like the Fed very much.
Yeah, that's right. So I just want, for people who are curious to know more about it, get the book, and it's on pages 34 and 35, where I talk about the actual program. It's called Directo a Mexico, and I reported for the first time because I was just digging and found on a I can't remember what the website is, but it's cited how they marketed the program in I believe it was in Minnesota, and so taxpayer money was used to have a little fair, and there were games, and they brought families in to recruit illegal alien customers.
How do you satirize this? You couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. This is our own government.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple other ones I must point out. Eva, pretty brutal takedown of the Emma Lazarus poem on the Statue of Liberty, which was, I think, long overdue. That it is now superseded our Constitution as the governing document of our time. Is this poem that was added to the Statue of Liberty years after the Statue of Liberty was installed. Talk to us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so the thing about the Open Borders, Inc. propagandists is they're so dumb. They're so dumb. And, I really couldn't top Stephen Miller's dismantling.
No one
of
can.
It.
One of the highlights of the Trump administration so far of Jim Acosta is a must watch.
Yeah, it really is. And it inspired me. There's a motto on the Statue of Liberty that says that we are liberty enlightening the world. Well, yes, we're liberty enlightening the world, not absorbing every last member of it. And, it is alarming that even so many normies on the right sort of just mindlessly adopt that same propaganda that we should welcome every last piece of wretched refuse, which comes, from the poem, without thinking twice about the impact that it has on the survival of our country. And, they can quote the poem, but they can't quote any section of the U.S. Code about what our actual immigration laws are. And I think even more importantly, generations of school children have been steeped in that propaganda, but not in any of the actual reality of how our immigration system is supposed to operate and why.
Yeah, that's correct. And you guys can read the book for more on that. But it's such a remarkable thing that the left has used this poem, and they don't seem to care about our border, our laws, our code. They care only about a poem. And I'm not saying that it isn't nice to have nice poetry, Michelle, but that's not, you don't base a country's immigration policy. And you just point out in this section about how illogical it is that if we live by the poem, we'd have at least 3 billion people in America.
Yes.
So if we really live, so is there a level where we can cut it off? Is there maybe it's 1.5 billion, but can we at least settle on something where we think that we have enough wretched refuse?
Yes, that's right. Well, and we can't even talk about numbers. One of the people who I asked to look at the book and provide a blurb was Roy Beck of Numbers USA. And that's the kind of sane discussion that we should be having. What are the proper numbers? And obviously, the book begins there's just a couple of pages of Open Borders, Inc. by the numbers, where I just sort of reel off what those numbers actually are, including some of the financial information, but more importantly about the demographic changes that are taking place that, again, the American people have not had input into.
Yes, Michelle Malkin again is my guest live in studio in D.C. Her new book, Open Borders, Inc., Who's Funding America's Destruction, available now. You guys can tell I think it's essential reading. And like my good pal Ian Coulter, she does not get enough credit for her research. And this is the thing that so many people they want to marginalize conservative ladies, Michelle. They don't. You guys are the hardest workers we got. And
appreciate that, and I agree.
And you deserve it. So there's so much here. I'm tempted to point out, have you comment on the Camp of the Saints, which is you're a racist for even thinking about the Camp of the Saints, but the Atlantic wrote a favorable, far left Atlantic wrote a favorable piece on it. But I'm not going to go down that road. I've got 2 minutes left, and I want to hear Yin Ella versus Ronald Singh. This is a big deal. And this is where the Hollywood crowd threw behind a fake story of woe for an illegal alien, while ignoring legal immigrant who was killed in the line of duty. Set up this contrast for us.
Yin Ella is the little girl who was allegedly separated from her mother and then photoshopped onto a notorious cover of Time magazine.
Yes.
Turns out that the separation was one that the father did not agree with, because essentially the mother kidnapped the child. And of course, once they got to the border, neither mother nor child were separated from each other. But this is a false narrative that confirmed the Open Borders bias of Democrats and the media. Everybody knows Yin Ella's name. The photographer, who was an Open Borders propagandist for Getty Images and has won a gazillion awards for it.
It's a good way to get awards.
Right? Well, that's the only way to get awards, right? And has essentially forged a very personal relationship with this woman. Everybody wants to know, among our audience, well, whatever happened to these people? Guess what? They're here in the D.C. swamp in subsidized illegal alien housing, just waiting for their ticket. That's what happens. But the Democrats, especially the ones in California, turned a blind eye towards Corporal Ronil Singh, who was killed by an illegal alien gang member who we hear the story time and time again, and Breitbart does an amazing job of reporting on the stories that the mainstream media doesn't want to, of these illegal alien criminals who take advantage of catch and release. And this hero was a legal immigrant himself of Indian descent from Fiji. During the Christmas season, when he was killed, in the same time period, you had Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi tweeting nonstop about the Yin Ellas of the world and showing abject callousness when patriotic, naturalized Americans suffer the consequences of bloody.
And you honor Ronil Singh here, and you debunk the Yin Ella myth, and it's all good stuff. And they're still in the country, Yin Ella's family.
Yes, they are.
Michelle Malkin, I have to go to a break, but it is wonderful to see you. Come back whenever you'd like.
Thank you, Alex. It's been a pleasure.